Hope you're enjoying, or at least tolerating well, the white snow. We're coming into our culture's calendar year. We're obviously a few weeks into the church's new year that begins at the beginning of Advent. Last week was Epiphany Sunday, and so we talked about what that represents and what that celebrates, and it's this kind of manifestation of God, Jesus, particularly to the world. And so we talked about the 12 days of Christmas and how those are gifts, symbolically, that are celebrated by gifts from God to the church. It's also a day of remembering the believer's baptism. We commemorate and remember Jesus' baptism by John the Baptist. And so it was also a day of us remembering our baptisms as we entered into our faith and our commitments. And then as we come into the new year within the culture, it's also just kind of the halfway point of the anniversary year that we celebrate as a church. And so we always kind of have a theme and a mission that we kind of set out in front of us that we want to focus on for the year. And so last year, Anniversary Sunday, we started that with the theme Serve God and Serve Others. That we wanted to really have our minds and our hearts and our energy focused on serving God and serving others in our community. And so it is that kind of stuff that we want to kind of focus on, that I want to focus on today and next Sunday as well. And I want to do that kind of tied in with the concept of New Year's resolutions. So I'm big on New Year's resolutions. Every year I usually start around Thanksgiving weekend, coming into Advent season, kind of brainstorming just what it is that I think I want to look at for the next year. And so I start jotting kind of all sorts of stuff down. I start evaluating the previous year, thinking about the resolutions or things that I'd put on the list then. And I just start thinking about the different areas of my life that I want to give attention to. And so it's not like a resolution or and I tend to be pretty specific. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to lose weight. I pick things like I want character, so I want to be healthier. So I want to eat healthier. Physically, I want to be healthier. I want my relationships healthier. And so I look at kind of general or broad views of those realities. And then I begin to think of, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, what are the smaller steps that I would have to do throughout the year to accomplish that? And so then by the time that the new year comes, I usually start narrowing that all down to a list that's manageable. And then by about this time, I begin to start implementing that. And some of the things that show up on my list, I know that as I put that on the list, like I know I'm not going to start some things until like May or even August. And so it's not a list of 12 things that I'm just going to hit hard out of the gate and start running on. I kind of know that I need to implement them slowly. A lot of times I just know that I need months to think about it, to kind of wrap my head around it, to pray about it, to move other things around in my schedule so that I can give those things priority and the space for them to work and to operate from. And this process, in general, we talk about it in our culture as New Year's resolutions to be a better you, but this is an old spiritual practice that's called crafting a rule of life. And so it's about putting the things in place that help us to grow in the character and the behavior and the attributes and the way of living that we feel like Christ is calling us to. And that's different, and that's unique for every one of us because we're each going through our own rhythms and our own struggles, and so no two rhythms should look alike. Hey boys, can I ask you to chill out? Like, you guys are a huge distraction right now, so if you guys need to chat and talk, just like head out. Thank you. And so it's about crafting that rhythm where we get to look at the things that we want in our life that we can kind of prolong, that happens beyond just the moments, the things that are temporary. And so as I get to that and as I look at that, I make sure that I give myself lots of grace, that I know I'm going to fail, but the idea is to restart it, to be able to restart and reset and go again and again and again until that becomes a rhythm, because those new rhythms usually don't happen immediately. They take time to foster and to form and to get into that place. And so in creating this rule, we hopefully are then planting that seed deep enough that formation begins to happen. And so as I was thinking about this, I wanted to I look at a number of articles. I look at different things that are out there on what does it look like when we really want to create the change and the transformation in our lives. And I came across this article that had a number of images, and I'm going to send this out tomorrow in the update. But it had a number of these images of how life happens in difficult situations. And there's about 20 photos of this photo essay that life is resilient. That despite being these hard, difficult situations, life finds a way to kind of push through and to make things happen. And so this is just one of the many images that I'll share in that, but just this sprout that is bursting through asphalt on this path to live and to grow and to be nurtured. And so these images then, for me, as I was looking at them, were just a good reminder for me that life wants to happen, that life with God wants to happen, and it wants to show up in our lives. And so part of that is just recognizing that and then trying to align ourselves with that. Now with that, there's also kind of this confession that needs to happen. When Cami and I got married, one of the things that we got as part of our wedding gifts were, 4 or 5 different couples devotions. Like couples can sit together every night and read about Jesus, and their marriage will just be so strong and they'll just be so unified. And there's a little bit of sarcasm in my voice in case you can't hear that, because Cami and I tried doing those and it just was painful. It was ugly. And so for us, doing these standard kind of cookie cutter approaches to what sometimes we say in culture, hey, do this and this will make you do these couples devotions and your marriage will be stronger. For us it was, hey, do these couple devotions and then you can wrap your night up with fighting and then go to bed. Have fun with that. And so we had these and we tried them and we're like, man, what's wrong with us? We can't do it. And so we finally gave ourselves permission to be like, okay, there's not a cookie cutter approach to this. It just doesn't happen. And I found that's also the case with just for devotions in general. They fall kind of stale for me in my routine because they kind of lack a depth in what they're sharing and what they're doing. And I'm not saying that devotions are bad or couples devotions are bad. I'm saying what may work for somebody doesn't work for somebody else. Okay, what may work well for other couples or other individuals or friends of yours, it may work for them fantastic. And they may recommend it to you and you may want to even consider and try it. But if it doesn't, that doesn't mean you don't have the spirituality, you don't have the depth of their faith, you don't have these other things, you don't have the strength in your marriage to withstand that. It means you're different. And it means the practice and the conversation has to be different, and the experience has to be different in your relationship. And part of that is because the relationship with God is unique. And relationships are unique, and interactions within relationships are unique. And so we should expect that also with God, that when we're firing with God, when we're engaging and interacting and growing in our intimacy with God, the way that we interact with God should be unique. It should have its own rhythm. It should have its own voice, its own calling as we look to align ourselves with what God is calling to. And so we've recognized also that this is also the case with our family. It's difficult for us to sit down and do family devotions where it's kind of this formed time where we sit down and we try to do this. We're going to do this, and then we're going to read a scripture, and then again, it always kind of ends in me usually getting frustrated and short. Don't nod your head, Jada, or Hines or Asher. Me getting frustrated and being like, "Come on, God, pay attention. What are you doing? Come on, we're doing this God thing for crying out loud." Doesn't work. And so we found that those conversations are best just in the regular rhythms of life. That as we observe things in song or culture or relationships, or as we're sitting around a meal at a table, or as we're driving in cars, the conversations that just kind of happen when we talk about what's going on with life, or the conversations we've had at church or with others, where we could bring those to the surface, those become kind of the meat and the rhythm that which we practice and celebrate with our family, and it happens in all that we're doing. in all areas of what we're doing. And the issue and the mindset or perspective of that is that it's about what are your eyes set on? Or as Paul says in Colossians 3, what is that your heart is set on things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God, and that your mind is set on the things above, not on the things of earth. And so it's looking at things with this filter of what is it that Christ is revealing to me? What is the thing that he is showing me? I had a conversation this past week with somebody, and they're like, well, when difficult things happen, God has those things in place for a reason. And I said, I don't believe that. I don't think bad things happen for a reason. I don't think good things happen for a reason. I said, I think things happen in life in general. And I said, and then God invites us to create the reason that we want to dictate those situations. And so if we're going through a difficult situation, we can find purpose in that. But it doesn't mean that God drug us through a valley so that he could show us or reveal to us a lesson. Unfortunate things happen to us in life, and in that, we get to find where God truly is present and comforting and gracious to those in those rhythms and those situations. So things don't happen for a reason, but we have the invitation to find the reason that we get to make alongside God in those situations. And so it's having that vision and having that focus and having that filter that as we go through life, we find where God is present, where he's speaking, where he's talking, where he's working with us in that. I was doing some cleaning over the holidays, and in doing that, I stumbled across an old CD by someone who was a huge influence for me as I started in ministry. His name was Mike Yaconelli, and he was the head of Youth Specialties, which was a youth ministry non-for-profit that did a lot of training and resources for youth leaders in their churches. And Yaconelli was kind of he was kind of outside. He was kind of on the perimeter because he was kind of this wild man when it came to church beliefs and practices. One of his big mantras was, if you're in youth ministry, get fired for the glory of God. Make your church fire you because you're so radically loving the people that Jesus loved. And he told the story of how he showed up. He or someone else he knew showed up to church, and the senior pastor called him in. He said, hey, you've got teenagers sitting on the front lawn of church smoking cigarettes and reading the Bible. And he said, we can't have teenagers sitting on the front lawn of the church smoking cigarettes. And he said, the conversation should have been, how in the world did you get kids that smoke cigarettes to get so interested and fascinated that they want to sit and read the Bible? Because whatever model that is, that's the model that the church needs to be following and implementing. And he said, oftentimes we get crooked in the way that we think about what it looks like to be faithful to Christ, where we want to follow the rules, where we want to play in bounds, where we want things to work a certain way. And we get so caught up with that. He says your church should have a policy that your youth ministry, that your teen ministry helped to create. So when they create the rule and their bylaws that say, oh, and there's no soccer allowed in the sanctuary. That's because your youth ministry was so radically loving teenagers that at some point you thought playing soccer in the sanctuary was a good idea. And so that the church should be so radical in its love that it's willing to go to the fringes and to play outside of the bounds in order to make sure that that Christ's love is felt and experienced in tangible ways. Mike Yaconelli says this in one of his books. He says, the routine of life is killing us. He says, we're going as fast as we can. We're living life at a dizzying speed, and God is nowhere to be found. He said, it's not that we're rejecting God, we just don't have time for him. We've lost him in the blurred landscape as we rush to church. We don't struggle with the Bible, but with the clock. It's not that we're too decadent, it's that we're too busy. We don't feel guilty because of sin, but because we have no time for our spouses or our children or for God. It's not sinning too much that's killing our souls, it's the schedule that's annihilating us. And most of us don't come home at night staggering drunk. Instead, we come home staggering tired, worn out, exhausted, and drained because we live too fast. He said the key for spiritual growth is not running faster, as in more meetings or more Bible studies or more prayer meetings, but spiritual growth happens when we slow our activity down. So if we want to meet Jesus, we can't do it on the run. That if we want to stay on the road of faith, we have to hit the brakes. We have to pull over into the rest area, and we have to stop. That Christianity is not about inviting Jesus to speed through life with us, but it's about noticing Jesus sitting at the rest stop. And so while the church earnestly warns Christians to watch out for the devil is in fact sitting in the congregation encouraging all of us to keep busy doing, quote unquote, good things. We've been talking about this at a board level, and we've been working on a strategic plan and where we are and making sure that we're leading and walking faithfully with Christ. And one of the big conversations we had at the close of last year was the reality and the importance that we know that everything that we do here at Faith has a reason. That we don't just do things because it's what churches should do, that churches should have a teen ministry, or churches should have a food pantry, or churches should do this, or churches should do this, but that the things that we do are not just programs for the sake of programs, but the things that we do within Faith, the rhythms or the rule of life at Faith, is about us creating a character and a culture that mimics that of Christ. And so we do things not program-based, but we do it practice-based. And so whenever we do something, there's a character that we're looking to form, that we're trying to create a turn a soil that will produce a fruit based on that practice. So for example, in a couple of weeks, on the 27th, we're going to share in a breakfast liturgy as part of our Faith Family Connection. I'm going to share this in the ministry opportunity, what we need for that. But we're sharing in that agape feast. And it's a shared meal together that harkens back to the way that the early church used to meet in the first century, of shared meal and shared commonality. And it was the first Eucharist, it was the first communion table, was them sharing a meal together in that remembrance and in that fellowship and in that community. And so we do that, not because we just want to eat breakfast on Sunday morning and because we do food well, but because it's important for us to sit around tables together and have conversation and to grow knowing one another and developing those relationships. And then the other part of that is that after that service that morning, we're going to have the Faith Family Fun. And the idea is that we're creating this space where multi-generations can come together and interact and meet. Because we know that young people foster better when they're connected with older adult lives who want and desire to see them and to spend time with them and get to know them. Doesn't matter if they culturally understand what's going on, who's on the top of the pop charts, or what movies are in the movie theaters, or whatever else. But it's about understanding and knowing where they are and seeing them as they are. And that likewise, that adults, that older folks, my age and beyond, and even then some, that we understand that we need that flexibility and the wonder and the awe that a younger generation has so that we don't grow stuck, so that we don't grow closed off to the creativity and the wonder that life has to offer us. And so we want to create that space because we're hoping that in coming together, I think we're playing cornhole that Sunday, and coming together in that regard, we're creating a playful experience where people can interact and compete without winning. ESPN's not going to show up and announce the winner, but we're just having friendly competition where folks can connect across generations, across their paradigms, across their peer groups, and in that, we create a stronger fabric for the community. And so the things that we do at Faith, we do them because we're trying to develop and grow a fruit that mimics that which the kingdom upholds. And so when we serve for a reason. When we worship, there's a fruit that we're trying to cultivate in our worship that will foster that in you. Robert Fulghum talks about the importance of that wonder and that awe in his book. And Robert Fulghum's the guy, he's the guy who wrote everything I need to learn, everything I learned in kindergarten, or everything I need to know about life I learned in kindergarten. And he wrote a couple other books that kind of have these kind of, concepts to them. But in this, he talks about how kids are great at wonder and that they're limitless in their abilities. And he says if you show up into a preschool class and you ask them, who can draw here, all their hands will show up. We can draw. What can you draw? We can draw anything. Right? And really anything. Yeah, anything. He says, great. Draw a dragon eating a cow, riding on a rainbow. And he's like, cool, I can do that. How big do you want it? Right? So for kids, like those things are limitless. He says, but we get then into our teenage years and our college years and we ask them, can you sing? Can you dance? Right? For the preschool kids, yeah, we can sing. What can you sing? Anything. What if you don't know the words? Great, we'll make them up. Not a problem. What do you dance? What dances do you know? I know any dance. I can do it all. Like for preschool kids, they get it because they haven't been taught that they're not the ones who are proficient at that. But as we get into college years, you ask a group of college kids who's done that, who can sing? Well, that's not what I'm studying. It's not my area of study. It's not my area of focus, and so I can't do that. And then you ask a group of adults who are later in life who can do these things, and no hands. In fact, you won't even get eye contact. We're going to stare at our shoes and pretend we're somewhere else for a few moments. And he says that the tragedy of this is that we lose the essence of life. We lose that which is the gift of life because somewhere we've been told we can't, or that we're not good at it, or we're not as good as someone else. And so this idea of comparison, that I'm comparing myself to another group or to another someone, when in reality I have the gifts and I may not be a professional at it or I may not be trained at it, but it's something that when I do this thing, it brings me alive. It shows me joy, it shows me wonder, it shows me the essence which is good in life. And that's what we need to discover. That's what we need to refoster in our formation. That our formation, that our rule of life, that when we do these things, they shouldn't be these obligatory rules that we have to do because we made this commitment to it. But it becomes this rhythm that when we do it, even though at the beginning it may seem like a struggle because we're trying to establish that priority, the reality is that when we engage with that, when we allow our defenses to drop, when we show up with expectancy, that we begin to see things in new wild wonder. And that creates something of awe within us. And so as we think about the rule of life, and here's what I want to offer to you, to the church, is that I'd love to help you do two things. One, I'd like to help you understand the rule of life that we operate and celebrate at Faith Community, that we work on every month and every week as a leadership board, of what is the rule of life and what are the things that we are seeking to intentionally form and create within us as a community, but also as for the community that is beyond us, but then also that creates the soil that is rich for you to take that for your own rhythm and rule of life. And so I want you to understand the church's rule of life and what that looks like. And we'll talk about the principles of that on January 27th as we have at these family meals. But then the second part of that is I'd like to help you begin to explore what your personal rule of life looks like. And so I want to offer that as we come into 2019, I would love to sit down with each and every one of you for about probably 30 to 40 minutes at a time and help you to begin crafting your own rule of life. And there's no deadline of when this has to happen. And I'm not going to be calling you up to set these up, but I'm saying if you're interested in this, if you're interested in learning more about this, curious about this, seeing what this looks like, I'd like to set up times with each and every one of you. So I'm not speaking metaphorically here. I'd like to sit down with every single person who is in this room, who is hearing me talk. I'd like to sit down with you and walk through what this process looks like, and to show you how you can begin to do this. And that I'm not driving it. I'm not showing up with a criteria and saying, well, here's what I think you need to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the things that are going to make you a better person, Christian, spouse, coworker, whatever. I'm not showing up with my agenda of what I want you to do. What I'm showing up to do with you is to help unlock some of those things within your own life. And then with your trust, to walk you through that process of identifying what are the areas in your life that you need to establish, reprioritize, put in place, and then what are the rhythms that you need to do in order to pursue that or to find that. And so I want to offer that to you. That's my gift to you in 2019. And so if you're interested in that, fill out a ministry opportunity card or send me an email or get a hold of me, and we'll set up a time that we can do that. And that'll take a few meetings. Again, we'll try to keep it to 30 minutes. We'll do a little bit at a time over a couple of weeks, and we'll see if we can get that rhythm crafted for you, for everybody that's here, for anybody who's in this room, for anybody who's hearing me say banana right now. That message is for you. And my phone just alerted me about something. And this is kind of an extension. We've practiced this concept of one word, where it kind of takes, instead of just having this long list of resolutions, it reduces it to one, or one area of focus. And that may be the process. That may be the first step for you to begin to work within kind of these parameters of this discipline, where you have that reality. And so if that's what you've been doing, like maybe this is time for you to take the next step and go a little bit deeper. If you've not done one word in the last few years, maybe that's where we'll start. This slow process of just really having kind of this laser focus on one idea or concept. And understanding that this process is a process that happens slowly over a long period of time. It's not something that will create radical transformation. Not that it can't, but the reality is that fostering this change in us is a slow process that leads us into the character and the mindset and the ideas of Christ. And then as we do that, we begin to look at all that we are, that we look at our spiritual life, our life with God, we look at our relational life, our life with others, our family members, coworkers, neighbors, etc., that we look at our physical health, our mental health, that we're looking at our emotional health, our financial status and what that looks like and what we want that to look like, and our missional. What is our drive in life? What are we living for? What are we doing with our time and our energy and our resources? And that each of those are being defined and shaped and moved within each and every one of us. I want to leave you with a text. It's from Romans 12, verses 1 through 2, and this is out of the Message by Eugene Peterson. And he says this: here's what I want you to do with God helping you. I want you to take your everyday life, your ordinary life, you're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work, you're walking around life, and I want you to place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing that you can do for Him. And so don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you and quickly respond to it. And unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you. He develops a well-formed maturity within you. Mike Yaconelli says this in his book, Messy Spirituality. He said, spirituality is mixed up, topsy-turvy, helter-skelter godliness that turns our lives into an upside-down toboggan ride of unexpected turns, of surprise bumps and bone-shattering crashes, a life ruined by Jesus who loves us right into His arms. And so my prayer for you and my prayer for us as a church is that God would take us on this wild toboggan, tipsy-turvy ride, that wherever He leads us, it ultimately leads us into the loving arms of Christ. Let's pray. God, thank You for the journey that we've had over the last few weeks of Advent, of waiting, of expectancy, of reflection on the last year and our own lives, of the losses that have been experienced, as well as the joys that have been felt in the different seasons. And as we come into this new calendar year, the idea of resolution may be something some of us expired a long time ago. We just put it out of our hearts and our minds as a reality because the routine failure from year in and year out of not living into those just became more frustrating. Or for those who have done it, that it becomes a fresh awakening, that's something we can invite you into. That as we go through the daily rhythms of our life, the daily interactions with others, that we begin to have the heart and the mind that sees You walking through life with us in that. And so God, help us to discover that, to discover a rule and a rhythm of life that allows fresh life to burst through the asphalt, the hardened exterior that life sometimes teaches us that we have to put on. And may we discover the expectancy and the awe and wonder of those who are younger than us around us, who still get so excited and fired up by life and by the interactions and the love that You have for us. That's my prayer for us in 2019. May we go with You throughout the year, God. Amen. Special thanks to those who showed up yesterday, came out in the snow as it was falling to help put all the decorations away for the holiday season. It took us about an hour, and it was great that they were able to come out and help so that we could get that done and all that put away. Wanted to make sure we didn't overlook thanking them. Would you stand so I can give you a blessing as you head into your week? I hope to hear from you about doing some crafting a rule together. So I'd love to have those conversations and to see where you're at and to help you move forward with that in 2019. But may God hold you fast, and may you hold fast to God. And as you do that, may you allow yourself to awaken to the wonder and the awe that surrounds you in life. And may you be filled with the joy that God walks you through the upsy, topsy-turvy journey that is life and is formation. May God be with you. Go in God's peace.